Welcome to another edition of the update. This edition, now we decided every other week to bring in my friends Saul Klein, John Riley, and do this live with you. If you missed it, we do have a podcast that goes out weekly. We go over everything that's happening that you're thinking of, and believe it or not, the things that you're not thinking of that you wouldn't even believe are in the background. That's what these two gentlemen bring to the table. And so today, no different. Saul, quick intro. John, quick intro. Saul, tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll go to John.
Sure. Saul Klein, real estate broker in California since 1977. I was, along with my partner, John Riley, we created ePro, the technology certification program for the National Association of Realtors. We created opt-out real estate syndication, a capability of ingesting MLS and listing data and distributing to portals. And currently, I'm the CEO of the San Diego Multiple Listing Service, SDMLS.
How many agents you guys have there?
And we've got about 11,500 members of our ML or subscribers and participants of our MLS.
Got it. So that means you're dealing with this daily, right?
Yeah, at least the technical side of it.
Perfect. All right. John, tell us a little bit about your history.
Well, basically, I've been a real estate educator for many decades and an author. And right now, I'm a recovering attorney. I no longer practice. I'm retired, as you can see in the background here in Hawaii. And I spend a lot of my days just talking to Saul and answering his questions.
Which is perfect for this because we're going to start asking questions. Everyone, you know me, Tristan, Lab Coat agent out here in Southern California. Let's get right into this. This thing's got a little bit more serious over the weekend. We're seeing now people practicing this stuff that we don't understand. I mean, CNN, the Wall Street Journal, Fox is saying we're confused because I think we are, right? And I want to start with the simplest thing just to get clarity because I'm getting it. We've got over like 20 listings and we're getting offers and I'm watching one thing stand out: concessions. So Saul or John, can you simply explain the difference between offering compensation and concessions?
Yeah, let me start and then let my old business partner, John Riley, kind of chime in on that. So the first thing, before we talk about language, because language is important, definitions are important, particularly when you're talking about legal issues. Language is important. But one of the things that we've learned, Tristan, about this settlement is that people need to be familiar with what this is. It's a settlement around civil antitrust litigation, class action, antitrust. And when you read the actual settlement, it's like 100 pages, but there's one thing that's really important, and that's paragraph 58. And paragraph 58 is about practice changes, and it lays out 13 points. And those 13 points you can put on 4 sheets of paper. Yep. Now, out of these 4 sheets of paper are tens of thousands, maybe there's 1.5 million realtors, maybe 1.5 million opinions, and seminars and webinars and documents about what these 4 pages mean. And so there is confusion, and the step one from where we stand is let's create a common language, and then we can talk about it. So some key words, the C words, are compensation. Boy, there's a lot of these things. Concessions. Right? Co-op. You could even say consideration, a lot of C words.
Okay,
right?
Got you.
So the main ones, though, in the settlement are, well, I forgot commission. The main one in the settlement, first of all, is compensation. So let's try and define compensation in the context of MLS.
Yes, because paragraph 58, here, I'm taking it up right here. The specific section that you highlighted for us, John, you did this for us. Just saying concessions, right? So we'll come back to this, but that's what we're referring to. Go ahead.
Yeah, so first of all, the settlement is about removing the offer of compensation out of the MLS. And it must be removed, and the MLS has been an offer of compensation. And not only is it an offer of compensation, you could just take the buyer out, show them a piece of property. If you sold them that property, you were going to get paid because the MLS, if you were a member, basically promised that you would get compensated. So compensation is basically a fee.
Mhm.
Compensation's a fee. And in the context of MLS, compensation would be a broker paying a fee to another broker. That's compensation. Another way you could define compensation is a principal paying a fee to a broker. That would be a seller paying a fee to the listing broker. Another way you could define it would be a fee paid by the buyer to a broker.
Mhm.
So compensation is a fee paid by a principal to an agent or by an agent to another agent. And so in MLS, if the seller, traditionally the seller would pay compensation to a listing broker, a fee, and then the listing broker would pay part of that fee, commission sharing, part of
Yep.
that fee to the person who represented the buyer,
You
right?
got it.
So compensation is a fee paid from seller to broker, broker to broker, buyer to broker. That's compensation.
Got it.
Concession
Yep.
is usually when somebody concedes something. So in the context of real estate, it's usually principal to principal. So seller to buyer. If the seller says, I'll pay the closing costs. If the seller says, I'll repair the swimming pool.
Mhm.
Those are concessions.
Okay. So
Right?
hold on that because I need clarity for everyone here, either from you or from John. Okay.
Another C word.
Well, hold on, because I want concessions. I want to understand this because I'm seeing this in offers that we're getting on our listings. So you see right here where it says the second highlighted area, John, that you highlighted. So either you or Saul. An MLS must ensure that the seller concessions are not limited to or conditioned upon the retention of or payment to cooperating broker, buyer broker, or other representative. Now, here's what I'm watching happen. We're getting offers as the listing agent. I'm getting offers that are saying two things. One, Mr. Seller, the buyer needs a credit for $500 or whatever amount to fix something because we want to fix something, a carpet, a window, I don't care. And then we need a concession for, and then that's when the percentages start coming up because we're getting a lot of offers and saying, hey, we need a concession for 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever percent. And that's going to be used to pay the agent. Right? That's what we're watching happen in the concession section. Explain that to me.
Yeah, so I'll start and then John can jump in. That the concession that they're asking for is not precluded by the settlement. In other words, the settlement says you have to take compensation off the MLS, but you don't have to take concessions out, but there are some parameters around concessions. So now what you're seeing is offers being made where the buyer, the person representing the buyer's asking for the fee
Yep.
to be paid by the seller to the person who represents the buyer, and they're calling it in the form of a concession.
Now, can the concession that's being requested just be the concession for the agent, or does there have to be another credit involved? Can it be a loan?
Go ahead, John.
You're talking about at the purchase agreement offer stage, right?
Submission. Yeah, submission of offer.
Yeah, that's the whole goal, is really to get it at that stage as opposed to at an earlier stage, like at the listing entry of the seller, having it at that stage. I think the sensitivity is as long as it's at the request of the buyer in the purchase agreement, that's a perfect location for it. And it can include other things than a buyer broker fee. See, the real danger here is trying to set what this commission arrangement is going to be in the listing itself, and making it in any type of advertisement or promotion. This is where the Department of Justice, I think, has a valid concern. They want negotiations at each stage, at the listing stage between the seller and the listing broker. They want negotiations, fair negotiations between the buyer and the buyer agent.
Yep.
And they want negotiations again at the time of the purchase offer. And that's the place where, yes, the request can be made and should be made by the buyer as to, here are the concessions and stuff I'm requesting that you make. And the seller then sits down with their broker and the parties negotiate it out.
Perfect. And that's the whole intent of it, right? The negotiations have to come from the buyer's side at the point of representing that offer. That's the whole purpose of this.
Yes. And if it's tried to be set by the seller and the listing broker too early, in other words, that's where the rub is. They don't want the offer of compensation to be at the point of the listing and the seller setting the commission. That was the rub with the blanket unilateral offer of compensation, which has been outlawed. And I use the word blanket because it was also made to anybody who found a buyer who brought in an offer. And there you had some buyers working with a friend or a relative who maybe just got their real estate license. They had an automatic right, at least under the prior one. But now that it's out of the MLS, they don't have that any longer. And people are looking to it occurring at the purchase offer stage,
which is what I'm experiencing
You're seeing it
as a listing agent.
So you're experiencing good things. You guys are actually getting offers.
Yes.
Yeah, we are.
So the most prominent thing about this settlement is it's removing the offer of compensation from the MLS. That's the most prominent thing. And the next most prominent thing is requiring that an agent, a licensee, have a written agreement with a buyer before they are allowed to tour or show them property, and that there are specifics about that agreement. It has to state compensation,
which we'll get into.
State how the agent's going to get paid.
Yeah, I want to get into that in a little bit. And then, yes, I see some great questions, which we will get to. First, though, I want to explain how we're approaching this on the listing side, because John and Saul said something, which is on the listing side, as the listing agent, we can't set that commission up front and say, hey, this is how much it's going to be, because that's the whole reason we're in this mess in the first place, because then it got translated into it's on the MLS, it's showing everywhere, and now it's an antitrust violation, right? So what we're looking at as far as what we're doing is we're saying, Saul, you're our seller. Saul, thanks for having me over. We're signed, we're everything. We're like, okay, Saul, so here's the situation. You hired me, and I'm using the fiduciary duty that I learned from Saul after talking to him a lot. Saul's like, dude, fiduciary duty. I'm like, okay, got you. So Saul, listen, you hired me. I have a fiduciary duty to you now as my seller to let you know how this all works. In the world that we live in, when we incentivize agents that are working with amazing buyers, that will increase your chance of getting an offer that you want. And my job is to get you the best possible price out there, the best terms, and to close as fast as possible. And in order to do that, you're going to have to start thinking how much, or if you're willing to give any amount to the buyer's agent that comes in with a buyer. I'm not giving you an amount. I'm just saying that that's going to have to happen. So start thinking about that. And now the question I'm getting, because we're doing this live, I'm getting, well, Tristan, how much? Right? And so I can only use history, right? And history is in our favor. But I can say, look, over the last few years in our area, this is what it's been, right? But I'm not telling you to do that. I'm just saying, get used to at least an amount. I don't care what it is, because now it's proving on our end that it's coming true. Now we're getting these offers and they're asking for concessions, right?
So Tristan, I might say something like, rather than give you an amount, let's just prepare for the request.
Right.
And when we get the request, let's compare the amount that's being asked for with what we believe to be the value of the property on the market. Let's look at how much you'll net as a seller, and we'll make that determination at that point in time.
I like that tweak. I like that, Saul. Thank you. I like that. So then let's transition to the pain point that I've been having over the last few days. Okay. We work with a lot of online leads. Like literally, our number one source of income as real estate agents are referrals from past clients and Sphere and agents. And number two, though, are online leads. And so online leads are coming through. Hey, I want to see a property. And then we're busting out this thing. And they're like, I'm not going to sign anything with you. I don't even know you. Right? I want to just go see one home. That's all I want. How do we best approach this?
Well, so I would say, and then I'll let John jump in on this, that if you've never met the person before, the less the commitment you ask for, the greater the chance that they're going to sign something for it with you. And so also, if you ask for a short duration, you don't have to worry about other issues with regard to what you ultimately ask for when you sign a more complex agreement. So my approach would be to ask a buyer who I've never met before to sign an agreement with I'll just make this up, a 3-hour duration. And at the end of 3 hours, it expires. So I'm not going to be held to it in the future because it's expired. And I just want to have the time to let these people know who I am, what my expertise is, be able to explain my value proposition, be able to talk through the reasons that I might be of value to them in the real estate transaction and how I'm going to then charge them. But right now, I need them to sign an agreement because now this is what's required in the settlement. I want to come back to that in a second. That's
what agreement is that? It CAR, because the Department of Justice looked at all of our forms before they approved them, which is important because, I mean, it just shows that we could set the precedent for the rest of the country because the Department of Justice came in and said, nope, 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 nope. Yes, yes, yes. What form are we using for that?
Well, so they didn't necessarily say that the forms are the forms you should use. They just didn't disagree that you could use them.
Didn't we hold back a certain amount of forms because
I think we did.
No, this doesn't work.
Or we didn't hold them back, pulled them back. They said, hey, we're not going to, because the forms were too complex, right? And so our opinion, and a lot of the people who we talk to nowadays believe that you're going to be able to ask for a different degree of commitment based on where you are in the relationship with the buyer. And if you're in the early stage of a relationship, your reservoir of trust is shallow. The more time you spend with them, the deeper your reservoir of trust. And the deeper that reservoir of trust, the more you're going to be able to ask, right? And so initially, I never met you before, and like, well, I don't want to get, I just met you, but I want to marry you. No, I just met you. I'm not going to ask for a big commitment. As a matter of fact, I like to say to agents I know, prior to this, how much did you charge when you showed property? And
most people will say nothing. I mean,
nothing.
unless you're in the state of like Washington or something.
Yeah. So you're not, at least initially, you're not giving up that much on initial showings, particularly if they're of a short period of time, to get you in a position where they're familiar with you,
Yeah.
right? Where you've had a chance to build some rapport, so they'll even listen to a greater explanation of a more complex agreement.
Okay. Makes sense. I am pulling up, guys, only because we got a request for this. And then we'll go to questions in about 5 minutes or so, because we've got quite a few. I am posting a couple of things in here. Number one is our podcast, because you may miss one of these episodes. We're always talking about what's next. We're talking about what's behind the scenes that you're not necessarily seeing. And when John mentioned that he is a recovering attorney and that he is there to answer Saul's questions, he wasn't joking. John, John is literally there to answer my questions. He's on this all day, which is a beautiful thing. Okay. So there you go. I appreciate you, John, by the way. I put up the link there. And these two gentlemen also a little bit ago created another website called the Data Advocate. That's where they put everything into writing, which is what we're listening to. All of these different amazing things. You can take the time to read them. It's a powerful site. It answers a lot of the questions that you have. It creates a lot more clarity. I just put that in there as well. And then one thing that was requested in the coaching call that I just finished up before I jumped in here was something that we are presenting at open houses so people better understand what the world is that we live in. Just a sheet that explains to anybody walking in, how have rules changed? And so I just put that in there. It's a PDF. It's something you guys can copy and take a look at. I would encourage you to take a look at the first two links and subscribe, go on to the Data Advocate. And then this is the sheet that I'm talking about. It's a PDF. I'm only showing you this so you can recreate it for yourself. It's really an introduction to people walking into open houses, the new landscape, and that just breaks down what this is all about. Really easy, one pager. And it's everything we're talking about here condensed so that the people walking in understand, right? Because an open house is a different situation, which is what I want to get into next, guys. How do we deal? Go ahead.
Before you do, Tristan, that's a great PDF you created. One of the ways to build trust and confidence in a sales relationship is to demonstrate expertise. And so now you're utilizing this change and confusion to demonstrate expertise to people, and that's a great start. I love it.
Yeah, well, look, I only learn it from you guys. And I'm going to pause really quick. Everyone here, we've got 500 of you on here. When this all went down, I'm like, I'm not an attorney. I went to law school. I jumped out. I'm like, I'd rather be a real estate agent, right? But these two gentlemen, I've always been friends with them for as long as I've been in real estate. And I thought, who better to call than Saul and John to understand what's going on because they're living this and they have so much prior experience. So you all have an opportunity to learn from some of the most amazing two people I know in the industry. Please take advantage of jumping into the podcast, reading what they write, because a lot of what they write comes from experience, and what's happening next is, to me, the most important piece. So
When you talk about experience too, I think it's important to know that we have over 100 years of experience.
Together,
old timers.
together.
That's very true. Well, look, I didn't want to get into age, okay? I just wanted to say you have experience, John.
Yeah, that's right.
Funny. All right, so let's quickly go into open houses and then go questions. At an open house, gentlemen, I'm sitting at an open house. I've got this PDF that I showed. People are picking it up so they understand, right? And then I'm like, hey, there's my form. Here's my car form. Sign in, right? How do I create agency by just talking to them about the house and telling them all about this stuff, and then I get in trouble? What's the line?
Well, if I look at the form, I'd have to make sure that it was clear that you are in your capacity of a listing agent and you're showing the seller's property, and you basically are going to stick to just to facts. Once you jump into suddenly answering questions from the prospect about, oh, do you think I should put this in the purchase agreement? I want to make an offer right now.
Okay.
Should I do this? When you start looking for advice, now you're dancing a thin line. Are you going to now switch over and also represent the buyer, in which case you have a dual agency scenario? Or so I think using some type of a notice. But the problem you sometimes find is many buyers at an open house do not want to sign anything,
Yeah, they don't.
and in my mind, there's a distinction slight between an open house and a tour. You see touring agreements, right? Some people make the touring agreements. Those are really not designed for open houses. They're designed for when you want to bring, an agent wants to bring a prospect to tour the property. So maybe I'm splitting hairs, but to me there was and I thought maybe it should be in the definition section. And Saul and I, looking through the entire settlement agreement, there's a lot of areas that need further detail and definition. And
Yep.
this is one of them.
Yeah,
I
so
agree.
here's one of the things that people are talking about and makes sense. When you sit in open house, there's a couple of ways to look at this. If you're the listing agent or you're another agent that works for the same broker as the listing agent being the brokerage, that you're there in your capacity representing the seller. And so if you are in fact in the capacity of representing the seller and you don't have that any connection with somebody who just walks in, you don't need anything from them written. But when you cross that line, whenever that might be, from just doing your job representing the seller under your contract with the seller, that's when you have to start to think about any written agreement you might then ask somebody who attends the open house to sign. And I would caveat this by saying, right off the bat, ask your broker, talk to your broker, look at the office policies of your broker. Don't go to an open house unequipped. Know what your broker is mandating for you, somebody working for the broker. But again, the line that people are looking at is, I have the right to represent my seller without getting a buyer to sign something. But at that point, when I cross whatever that is, that's when I need to be thinking about signing of something. And you'll find brokerage firms have different forms, states have different forms. There's going to be a lot of choice. And I go back to this, there's only 4 pages. There's 13 items, and there are a million opinions. And even things that we once thought were explicit, we hear people talking the other side of this now. So, and this is an important point, all things being equal, this isn't even going to be final until November 26th. That's if the DOJ doesn't step in. And by the way, the DOJ is not a party to this, but they're standing in the background. We know they want certain things. We know they don't like certain things. We know this is a decade-old fight with the Department of Justice and organized real estate. And so we have to be concerned with what the DOJ thinks, although they're not a party to this settlement. And a lot of people are trying to come up with conclusions before the ink's dry, so to speak.
That's true. Well, dude, we're humans, right? We're gonna try to cope with it by figuring out what we think is going to happen, right? It's a normal thing.
And there's one other point, and that is state law trumps anything in the settlement. In some states like Colorado and I think Connecticut and some others don't have a requirement of having somebody sign when they go to an open house. And so
why didn't we lead with that in the very beginning? Like, no, I'm not saying that we didn't, but I think we should repeat that at the very beginning of every webinar. Like, state law trumps anything in the settlement, right?
Yeah, and someone just made a note that Arizona is another state.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure there are ones that we're missing. Guys, by the way, all 3 of us originally worked in California, even though John is in Hawaii now. So that's what we're more versed in. So guys, do you guys mind if we go to some questions? Because we got a whole bunch.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Number one, this is the obvious one. Why don't we just leave NAR? Why don't we just leave, guys?
So this is a great question.
Yes, it is.
What we're talking about is if you follow this, you're protected. You're protected. Protection has been purchased for you at the cost of $418 million plus these practice changes. So if you were not covered by this, if you said, well, I'll just quit NAR and then I can do what I want, well, then you're not protected. You could be in trouble, right? And so this is beyond that. This is how do you maintain the protection that NAR has bought for you through this settlement? And so people talk about, well, we'll just quit NAR. And while you might be covered as an individual, if you start doing things that are contrary to this settlement, you could find yourself at some point being served. I don't know if you follow Inman. I read a lot of different things, and Inman News had interviewed Ketchmark, the attorney for the plaintiff.
Yeah.
And they asked him things, and it's very telling. You go back and read the interview, but I thought this was kind of interesting. He says, you mentioned you're going to be looking at what happens. Are you doing anything this week or next in terms of prepping for the deadline or deciding how you're going to police it? Ketchmark says, sure. There's a team of lawyers from all of the different law firms that are involved in this. Several plaintiffs' law firms with entire teams of attorneys. We have weekly calls and we're taking very aggressive steps to prepare for the launch of this. We plan on staying on top of this as it rolls out. You've got attorneys watching. They're watching what you write in social media. They're watching multiple listing services. You got the DOJ behind it. They're watching. And if people breach this settlement, if they're no longer in compliance, they're not going to be protected. The settlement gives you protection. And so as long as you're following the settlement, you're protected. You deviate, you stray for whatever purpose, and you could find yourself being served at some point in time. Remember, the one case, the Sitzer Burnett, $5 billion. Are you prepared to pay your share? And so the real estate transactions that you've been involved in for the last 4 or 5 years are covered. You don't have to worry about liability as long as you follow the new rules, as vague as they might seem at this point in time.
Yeah.
And if you breach any of these, you're probably not going to hear from attorneys for a year or 2 or 3 because they want damages to build up.
They're collecting.
So they can come back and do it all over again.
You mentioned that you were covered. You're covered if you were a realtor up to the date of class notice. The date of class notice was Saturday, August 17th. So if you were a realtor during that period up to that point, you are covered with the releases under the settlement.
Got
For
it.
people who are joining afterwards, they're not technically covered under the settlement.
And remember what the finding is.
But they can't be sued because they weren't realtors.
Yeah, they weren't real estate agents.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, realtors.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you have to think about is that if you were a member of an MLS, you were part of a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Oh, I know I wasn't. Well, it doesn't matter what you think you were. You were a member of an MLS. You've been that MLSs, the plaintiffs, the defendants have been found guilty of conspiracy, violation of the antitrust laws. I think it's amazing to me that realtors, and my whole life as a realtor, we've always been very cautious when it comes to antitrust.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I like to say, when it comes to antitrust, we wore raincoats and we carried umbrellas. Right? Because we wanted to be ultra protected when it came to antitrust. And now we have major antitrust litigation, and we have a carve out now to be protected, and people are talking about workarounds. It's a risk.
Well, the workaround is the challenge, right? Because a lot of people say, well, why can't I post it other places? Well, the fact that you're a realtor is why you can't post it anywhere else.
Well,
right?
and so again, it's kind of interesting, Tristan, because in this 4 pages, it doesn't say you can't post it somewhere else.
No, it just says MLS,
It just
right?
says on MLS.
Yeah.
But some people are saying, well, maybe you can't put it somewhere. Some people are even saying, well, if you call the listing agent, they can't say anything about it.
Mm,
It doesn't say that here.
no,
Yep, but
it's
maybe it's
unclear.
right. We
Yeah.
don't know yet. We're going to find out.
We will find out. We will. That's for sure.
Well, one of the areas is it's clear you can't have it in the MLS and you can't put it in the MLS remarks. But what's not clear is they say you can still have offers of compensation in a non-MLS way. And that is something I think which is going to raise the eyebrows of the Department of Justice, because basically their position is they don't want to see the offer of compensation anywhere prior to the actual request that the buyer makes at that point. So anything premature of that may be suspect. The attorney, Jessica Leal, even made a statement, that offers of compensation should not be made anywhere, but certainly not on the MLS.
Yeah,
Now,
very good point.
this does not mean that the Department of Justice says, oh, the seller can never pay. No, when we get into response to a concession request from the buyer at the offer stage between the seller and the buyer, at that stage, yes, the seller can say, okay, we'll pay that. It's the in advance of that stage where people are having these workarounds. I think it's kind of I think what Leo called the messy middle
Yeah, the
situation,
messy
where
middle
it's
is
kind of messy.
I think the future problem, because we don't know what we don't know yet, right?
Yeah.
Guys, I put up the NAR fact website there. Somebody brought it up. That's a great idea. That's a great site. Hold on, let me put it in there because it keeps
It is a great site, and it has almost 100 frequently asked questions with answers. But what I don't know about it is, does the DOJ agree with all of those answers?
Yeah.
Because as Saul said, the DOJ was not a party to the settlement, although they did attend the settlement negotiations. DOJ representatives were there, but they have not signed any type of what we call a statement of interest. In many of the antitrust broker cases, the DOJ has stepped in and to help the judges gave their opinion in a statement. This is how we have signals from the DOJ as to what is acceptable to them. But, they have no announced policy. And I think I heard that from a DOJ attorney saying that probably in October, they're evaluating giving a statement of interest involving the NAR settlement, in which we'll know exactly what the DOJ's position is. Right now, it's not clear.
Well, but didn't John, the DOJ, if you read the statement of interest in the MLS PIN case, Property Information Network in New England, it makes it clear what they think. And then an attorney for the DOJ actually stated that while the settlement is a step in the right direction, and that's, you can't have offer of compensation in the MLS. It's a step in the right direction. The DOJ believes, and they said this publicly, there shouldn't be offers of compensation at all. They don't want to see it anywhere until it gets negotiated in the contract. So that's what they believe. Now, does the DOJ have any power? Well, they're not a party to this litigation, but you know what? They have the right to criminally investigate brokerage firms and associations of realtors and MLSs, and criminal investigations by the Department of Justice are costly.
Yeah, it's no joke on those either. Hold on, Saul, do you have, Rob's asking a good question. I know other people are thinking it. Do you have those 4 pages that you were talking about?
I do. And so maybe we can send them. If they go to the Data Advocate, they're actually part of the settlement. So if you look at the settlement itself,
okay.
starts on, it's paragraph 58, starts on page 27.
Hold on. Data advocate, and you go over to the search. What do I type in here? Oh,
I would find it another way, but if you can find the actual settlement document, or we can send you a link. It's in the settlement agreement.
okay. Well, we'll just find the settlement agreement
Right.
somewhere there.
And we'll put it in an email, Tristan, and send it out to everybody.
Okay. That's
But
better.
it's in the actual settlement. Again, you'll find all the documents we could get our hands on as this thing is developed. And we've published them on the Data Advocate, so you'll find them all there. So in the actual settlement itself, starts at page 27, it's paragraph 58, it's 13 points. These are the 13 points everyone's speculating about. Now, I want to say one more thing, John, about NAR and CAR, is they're guessing as well. And we're in the situation. I love NAR. I'm a realtor emeritus. I've been a member of NAR for over 40 years and have volunteered a lot and worked with the organization. But I have to tell you that the offer of compensation comes from the NAR rules. And so the NAR model rules that NAR told us we could do, they're the reason we're dealing with this right now. So while I love the FAQs that NAR has created and the FAQs that CAR has created, I still think it's critical that you talk to your broker about what they're doing, about what they're recommending. And it could turn out that some of the information that NAR is putting out or that CAR is putting out, not intentionally, just because it's so vague right now, might turn out to be the wrong information. We just don't know at this point.
That's true. That's very true. I have a question that's particular to, actually, John, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that, on the Data Advocate, we also have a link to over 30 links to other resources that cover the settlement.
You know what? One of our audience members, James, thank you, James, just found the link to what you guys were requesting. I'm going to put it on there. There you go, which I think Kevin also found. There you go. Good. Thanks, guys. Data Advocate is a lifesaver. It's literally everything we talk about. We'll upload that example of what you should give out in an open house. I'll upload, John, I'll send that over to you so we can upload that one too.
Okay.
Question from Michael Bobadilla. What's up, Michael? What if I have a signed listing agreement signed prior to August 17th? My client already agreed to pay me a commission.
Well, I think NAR has an answer to that in their NAR facts, where they talk about the date. If you had something before the date of notice, the August 17th date, then it's still going to be enforceable, and enforceable, I think, under the old rules of the association. So it's covered there. But it also made me think back to a fact if somebody said, well, maybe I won't stay on with NAR. Maybe I won't stay with the association. If there's this, I've got to handle my MLS guaranteed commission model because of this. Maybe I'll just drop out. There are a lot of benefits for staying in the association, besides what this area that we're talking about now.
Yeah, listen, guys, this isn't over. Everyone listening in, this is not over. We're in the middle of it because there are other things that are going to happen after November 26th or 27th. I don't even remember the date. What's going to happen is there are other lawsuits that we're not even privy to that are being talked about and being formulated on the back end. So don't think this is all over. What I want you guys to do is know that you are going to continue to have to go out there and work like me. We're trying to figure this out on the fly and go and say, well, what becomes normal as far as this that has now already been approved? Well, it's getting approved in November, right? Let's try to figure this out as new rules are going to happen and the new norm is going to happen. In fact, talking to Saul and John, guys, we've talked about this one a lot, which is we're the ones creating the new norm, right? A year from now, everyone that's out there working right now is creating the new norm. We're the ones doing it.
Yeah, you're creating new best practices, right? Hey, so go back to that question about I got a contract, I got a listing agreement.
Yeah, Michael Bobadilla.
And in the listing agreement, probably it says that I'm going to put it in the MLS and then I'm going to offer compensation. Well, now that you can't put it in the MLS any longer, you still have an agreement with the seller that they're going to pay you something, but you can't put it in the MLS because it no longer can be in the MLS. And so that's why in some states and some brokerage firms, and so we're seeing people say, hey, you got to get a new agreement. Well, it makes sense that because you can't keep that end of the bargain, right, where you've agreed to offer compensation through the MLS, if you can no longer offer compensation through the MLS, that a new writing, a new document, what's that word, John? In the language of right, a new writing to explain the new circumstance and the new situation probably makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Question from Sherry. Great question. By the way, guys, I don't know that we're going to get to all the questions. I'm going to show you one more time. The Data Advocate. So that's the dataadvocate.com. On the top right, you see where it says contact us? If you go ahead and if you have a question that we didn't answer that's really important to you, right? Just dump it in there and we'll do our best to get to you. But here's a question from Sherry. Where was it, Sherry? It was a really good. Oh, there are many brokers who are spreading bad information. I'll keep on losing it. Bad information. Would agents be covered by their broker's E&O because of that misinformation? I'm assuming should they rely on that bad information, right?
Yeah, so
I don't know the answer.
that's actually a great question, and I think that you need to call your E&O carrier and ask them. But there's no doubt that brokers might have the wrong information, might be disseminating some improper, erroneous information. Brokers always responsible for the acts of their agent. Does the E&O cover it? Great question for the E&O provider.
And I think it raises a point too. There's tremendous responsibility now placed on the managing broker. The managing broker really needs to take a hard look at their office policy manual. They should probably have it reviewed by an attorney, not just a real estate attorney, but a real estate attorney who's also familiar with antitrust issues, such as steering,
crazy,
and all of those, to make sure that there isn't anything in there that's going to trip up or be useful to a follow-up attorney months from now who decides to try to file a copycat case, and apply to people maybe who were not covered or
listen, if you
by the NAR settlement.
John, I'm going to take that a little further and say, sorry, I had a spider. If you guys are listening in and you're listening to what John's saying, like to me, I'm thinking, okay, broker, let's say you're a broker. You've got a brokerage, not just a broker, but a brokerage. And you've got a marketing department in-house. You've got somebody for social media. Well, guess what? I would want you, and John and Saul would want you to have, hopefully, not just somebody you outsource legal, but you have an in-house legal team or somebody you hired that's working for you. Like, this is serious, guys. There's no way you as a brokerage should be throwing out misleading information. It is your duty to your agents.
Absolutely.
To do an amazing job here. So please take that into heart. John, you just reminded me of that. It's like, that is one thing we definitely need. Catherine's got a great question for either of you. Per the settlement, are we required to state the amount of a buyer's agent's inquiries? I don't know if I understand that one. I think it was commission based. Yeah. Catherine, can you rephrase that? Unless Saul, you understood it?
Well, I think I understand. Per the settlement, no. The settlement is vague. and doesn't cover a lot and doesn't mention percentages and amounts and your duty to disclose. It does say you can't use the MLS as an offer of compensation. Doesn't address if somebody calls you, if somebody asks you. These are interpretations that people are making when they read this, when they go back and look at their own history, when they look at their own bias based on their paradigm of how you list and sell real estate. And so but when people say per the settlement agreement, no, the settlement agreement doesn't address that. That's one of the complaints that John and I have had, and a lot of people we know all along, is that the settlement is vague. A lot of legal documents start out with the definitions section, and they define things, and then when you get to them in the actual document, everybody is in agreement and understands what's being talked about. In this settlement, there's no definition section.
That's funny. That's
You know,
true.
and the other issue with a settlement is when you're in settlement negotiations, there's a lot of compromise that happens. And because this was all done behind closed doors, we don't really know what people's true position was. Did they compromise something that probably they shouldn't have? And so that's another cloud on how the process was made, but it was because of compromise.
Yeah. Very good point. Guys, there's a really good question. Alina, I do understand this one. Thank you. Does the buyer have to ask for the compensation for their agent as a concession, not as a buyer agent compensation? That is a really good question because it hits at the heart of everything we do. Alina, great question.
So let me answer and let John jump in. Tell me I'm wrong. They could actually ask for it either way. They could ask for it to be a concession where the seller concedes a certain amount of money to the buyer for specific or general purposes, or it could be where the seller, where the buyer asks the seller to compensate their agent. Again, outside of MLS. And so it could be either way. As a matter of fact, I've seen forms that actually are seller compensation. I think John and I have looked at a couple of those.
You know, what comes up often too is when you're the listing broker and you're talking to the seller and telling them about the new normal and how it's going to work, that more than likely the buyers are going to come in requesting some type of offset of the commissions. The seller might say, I understand that. I understand how it works. So I'd be willing to make a direct offer of compensation to be paid out of escrow, in which I'll commit to a certain amount. And you'll see forms now where the seller can make a direct offer to the buyer that will be, if the deal closes, out of the closing, I will pay the buyer agent fee. So it can be direct from the seller.
Got it.
And forms, a real quick note about forms. Well, there are 50 states and a couple of territories, and each state is developing, or not, pretty much their own forms.
Yes.
And so we're talking to a national audience.
Yeah, we are all over.
Right. A national issue that's going to be handled locally, state by state.
Yeah. And this is why we're only going over what is on paragraph 58 for the NAR settlement and what stems from that, right? And everything else can be different state by state as well. So, John?
But you know what else has been triggered by this is a greater degree of cooperation between people in the brokerage community. And I'm not saying conspiracy, I'm talking about the duty of cooperation. Yeah. And one of the ways is I'm seeing that different firms are having their own forms, and they'll have their board attorney review it, and they're creating their own forms, maybe not necessarily using something from the association. And they made sure that they got it done ahead of time because they were under a lot of pressure to come up with these things with the deadline of August 17th. And in doing so, they found out that they're able to make their forms much more consumer friendly.
Yeah.
And so we're going to see there a lot more cooperation to create the new normal.
Yeah. So on that really quick, only because so every week, guys, John and Saul they go back and forth and they include me in the emails on preparing for this talk. So this takes a lot of preparation. It's not just like, hey guys, let's show up and talk. So in that, I was reading in one of your notes back and forth that we representing the buyers have to show a lot more value. And in one of our coaching sessions this morning, I want to just show what we created and went through, just so people understand what it should look like. And I created a checklist really quick for me and our agents, just so we can go through like phase 1, preparation, right? And it includes signing the agreement. Phase 2, the home search, explaining it. Phase 3, the offering. Phase 4, the contract to close. Like, what does this look like? We're talking about the psychology of this whole thing, inspections, appraisal, because now that could be an issue with what we're seeing. And then going through this whole process. We try to make it as simple as possible, but it reminded me when I was looking through the notes right now, Saul saying, we've got to make ourselves more valuable, guys. And if you need this, if you need that, Asusena put in, if anybody wants to join our coaching, we go through this every day, but you'll also get what we're talking about in the data advocate as far as details from the settlement, what's happening next. John, Saul, anything in closing that you can add? Asusena, if you can put that link so people could jump into coaching if they want to.
Well, I'll jump in first and say that I think that you're going to see some different approaches to gaining the buyer agency contract. In other words, you're going to have intense competition to get that buyer listing. The same as you've experienced for years, having intense competition to get the seller's listing. You went through a lot of preparation for that. You're now going to see an intense competition to get the buyer to sign a buyer agency agreement. And that's going to require skills, negotiation skills, knowledge, all of those elements. That's my comment.
That's true, man. That's true. And that's why we're going to keep on doing these live every other week. The weeks that we're not doing this live, we're recording the podcast, which just put it in there so you guys can tune in. Saul, anything in closing?
Well, I think that in the long run, we could see increase in professionalism. We could see, people in real estate often talk about their value without defining their value. And so, talk is cheap. It's easy to be in social media and talk about how valuable you are and all the things you do and why you're worth whatever it is you're worth. But now you got to put your money where your mouth is, because you actually have to convince people that they should make a commitment to you. And think about it that way. John mentioned, your first day in real estate, typically you don't go out and list properties because sellers don't trust you yet.
Yes, I remember that.
Right? It's going to take a while. And so maybe there's added value today that there wasn't before in participating with groups that already have built trust, like teams, like brokerage firms that have made a name for themselves in the community, where now it might become more important that you learn how to promote the value that comes from the organizations that you're a member of.
Yeah.
As to why somebody might want to hire you, even though you just got your license 3 hours ago.
That's very true. That's very true. All right, Saul, John, everyone up. Can you do me a favor and just thank Saul and John in preparation and everything that they do here? I wouldn't be able to show up without these two guys because there's no way I can keep track of all the changes. So Saul, John, thank you for me personally. You guys you two are keeping me up to date. And there we go. Everyone's thanking you guys. Let's keep on.
That's great. Thank you.
And we love to do it, Tristan. We're
Well,
old real estate instructors.
We love you guys. Come on.
We love to do it.
Why we love working together. We do so well together. So thank you, everyone tuning in. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. If you have questions and we missed anything, which I know we did, just message us, go to the data advocate, and we'll go from there. Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
Tristan. Good to see you.
Nice to see you
Take
again.
care. John, head to the beach.
Yeah, John, go to the. That's-
Aloha.